We may have been designed to sleep in a biphasic pattern, meaning one longer bout of sleep at night and then a short afternoon nap during the day, very much like the siesta cultures around the world. But is napping always a good thing? Well, not necessarily. Although we and other scientists have discovered that naps can have benefits for both the brain and for the body, naps can be a double-edged sword. Long naps in the afternoon or in the early evening can just take the edge off your sleepiness. It's a little bit like snacking before your main meal. So, if you are struggling with sleep at night, the best advice is not to nap during the day. Instead, build up all of that healthy sleepiness so that you give yourself the best chance of falling asleep easily and then staying asleep soundly across the night. But if you're not struggling with sleep and you can nap regularly during the day, then naps of around 20 minutes taken early in the day can be just fine. The Body Keeps the Score is the beautiful and suggestive title of a book published in 2014 by a Dutch professor of psychiatry at Boston University called Bessel van der Kolk. The book has proved immensely significant because it emphasizes an idea that has for too long escaped psychiatrists and psychotherapists. Van der Kolk stresses that people who are suffering emotionally are unlikely to do so just in their minds. Crucially, their symptoms almost always show up in their bodies and the way they sit or breathe, and how they hold their shoulders, their sleep patterns, their digestion process, the way they treat their spots, and their attitude to exercise. Taking the body more seriously opens up new avenues for both the diagnosis and treatment of emotional unwellness, instead of simply seeing a person as a disembodied mind which must talk its way to a cure. A therapist is advised to see the body as a kind of scoresheet of the emotional experiences that its owner has been through. A scoresheet that should be read and attended to as carefully as many mental account. Space inside our arteries is fully utilized. At every heartbeat, a higher blood pressure literally compacts millions of red blood cells into massive trains of oxygen that quickly flow throughout our body. And the tiny space inside our red blood cells is not wasted either. In healthy conditions, more than 95% of their oxygen capacity is utilized. The reason blood is so incredibly efficient is that our red blood cells are not dedicated to specific organs or tissues, otherwise, we would probably have traffic jams in our veins. No, they're shared. They're shared by all the cells of our body. And because our network is so extensive, each one of our 37 trillion cells gets its own deliveries of oxygen precisely when it needs them. Blood is both a collective and individual form of transportation. Lions are the only cats that live in large social groups called prides. A pride can have 3 to 30 lions and is made up of lionesses, mothers, sisters, cousins, and their cubs, along with a few unrelated adult males. The pride has a close bond, and it's not likely to accept a stranger. Lions and lionesses play different roles in the life of the pride. The lionesses work together to hunt and help rear the cubs. This allows them to get the most from their hard work, keeping them healthier and safer. Being smaller and lighter than males, lionesses are more agile and faster. While it may look like the lionesses do all the work in the pride, the males play an important role. While they eat more than the lionesses and bring in far less food, males patrol, mark, and guard the pride's territory. Males also guard the cubs while the lionesses are hunting. And they make sure the cubs get enough food. When a new male tries to join a pride, he has to fight the males already there. The new male is either driven off or succeeds in pushing out the existing males. We just don't have the capacity to process everything at once. This is a particular problem when we try to multitask. We can switch attention from one task to another and back again. But when attention is overloaded, we miss things. And the result is nearly always that we perform tasks less well than we would doing them one at a time. It's only truly possible to do two things at once if they require different sets of cognitive resources. For example, it's totally possible to read a book and listen to music at the same time, which would suggest that driving while talking on the phone is not a problem, as long as it's a hands-free phone. It's not that simple though. Research has shown that while talking on the phone, we have a tendency to create mental images, and this uses the same visual resources needed for driving. And if visual resources become too stretched, it's perfectly possible for a driver to look directly at a hazard but fail to see it. Not everything will make it through to conscious awareness. So multitasking makes us, at best, inefficient and at worst, downright dangerous. If you're feeling like you should be doing 17 things at once, remember, that's just not the way your brain is wired. Like other low-impact exercises, yoga reliably improves fitness and flexibility in healthy populations. The practice has also been shown to be a potentially powerful therapeutic tool. In studies involving patients with a variety of musculoskeletal disorders, yoga was more helpful at reducing pain and improving mobility than other forms of low-impact exercise. Adding yoga to an existing exercise routine can improve strength and flexibility for hard-to-treat conditions like chronic lower back pain, rheumatoid arthritis, and osteoporosis. Yoga's mix of physical exercise and regimented breathing has proven similarly therapeutic for lung health. Lung diseases like chronic bronchitis, emphysema, and asthma shrink the passageways that carry oxygen, while weakening the membrane that brings oxygen into the blood. But breathing exercises like those found in yoga relax the muscles constricting those passageways and improve oxygen diffusion. Increasing the blood's oxygen content is especially helpful for those with weak heart muscles who have difficulty pumping enough oxygen throughout the body. And for those with healthy hearts, this practice can lower blood pressure and reduce risk factors for cardiovascular disease. In a seller's market, the prevailing marketing trend tends to be what we call a product-focused market. In this market, you have the product, and if customers want it, they're going to come to you. In this case, you should develop the product to the best of your ability. You should innovate in that product, try to reduce costs, and really focus on the product itself. Your business objective in a product-focused market is to sell as much as you can, and profitability in such a market comes from volume, selling as much as possible. In the past, when we've studied product-focused markets, we've found that profitability is tied to market share. So, market share becomes your business objective. Why does market share increase profitability? Because the bigger your market share, the more your revenues increase. Additionally, with a larger market share and higher volume, you can lower the product cost, which hints at increased profitability. Higher revenues, lower costs, more profit. That's the goal of a product-focused market. When you're product-focused, where do you find growth? Do you develop new products based on your product experience, or do you go to new markets? That's product-focused marketing. Someone who looks extremely active, whose diary is filled from morning till night, who is always running to answer messages and meet clients may appear the opposite of lazy, but secretly, there may be a lot of avoidance going on beneath the outward frenzy. Busy people can evade a different order of undertaking. They are practically a hive of activity, yet they don't get around to working out their real feelings. They constantly delay the investigation of their own lives. They are lazy when it comes to understanding particular emotions. Their busyness may be a subtle but powerful form of distraction. Our minds are in general a great deal readier to execute than to reflect. They can be rendered deeply uncomfortable by so-called large questions. What am I really trying to do? What do I actually enjoy? Who am I trying to please? By contrast, the easy bit can be the running around, they never pausing to ask why, they repeatedly ensuring that there isn't a moment to have doubts or feel sad or searching. Busyness can mask a vicious form of laziness. Our lives might be a lot more balanced if we learnt to reallocate prestige, putting it away from those with a full diary, and towards those wise enough to allow for some afternoons of reflection. We should think that there is courage not just in traveling the world, but also in daring to sit at home with one's thoughts for a while, risking encounters with certain anxiety-inducing or melancholy but also highly necessary ideas. The reason why I believe it's actually very interesting to study spending is because it's so ubiquitous, like we all spend and we all actually have a lot of control over our spending. We are going to spend some of our money because we have to. And are we really thinking about spending it in ways that might actually make us happy? And if yes, what can we learn as researchers to help people? First off, know yourself. Are you an introvert, an extrovert? How do you want to spend your money? Second, use your money to build social relationships. And third, put an emphasis on experiences over things. So if I were to analyze myself for my money, if I'm getting the best return, I am a person who loves my family and I love sharing experiences with them around food. So I'm thinking I will spend that extra budget money, for the purposes of the show, to take my mom with me to Italy and we have some fantastic meals. So imagine like a group of software engineers that all sit together in the same room and play ping pong in after hours and know one another. Those types of groups can really tolerate the nonconformist weirdo. And that might actually be a very good thing for the organization because that weirdo, so to speak, brings new ideas and new sensitivities and has different ways of thinking of problems. And that might be really important for the organization's success. Especially if this organization needs some innovation and new thoughts in order to be successful with its product offerings. So we find that there's this trade-off between your ability or tendency to behave in a compliant way, but also this security or lack thereof that you gain from the extent to which you are part of a tight-knit group or not. And really being in the right kind of sweet spot leads to bringing the greatest success in the organizations. Research has shown that in certain situations, silent meetings actually work better. Specifically, if the goal of a meeting is to brainstorm or solve a problem, silent meetings have been shown to generate better ideas. But why? Solutions to a problem will often be a novel idea. And novel ideas challenge convention. They can rock the boat and make people feel uncomfortable. But when participants gather around a table and generate written solutions in silence, a safe space is created. Novel ideas can emerge, and people are less afraid of feeling embarrassed. Silent meetings also circumvent negative effects of something called production blocking. In a conventional meeting, only one person at a time can speak. As you wait your turn, the conversation may shift, and you may lose your opportunity to raise an idea. Silent meetings allow for everyone to express ideas simultaneously. So how do you create a silent brainstorming meeting? Have people write down their ideas independently, then sort them into clusters, discuss, and vote on the ideas that people like. The key is to let the initial ideation phase happen independently and in silence so we can separate egos from ideas. Silence is just one alternative. Since meetings have different goals, there's no reason they all have to look or sound the same. We tend to operate with the view that the best way to please people is not to bother them too much. We keep many of our dilemmas and confusions away from those we like, for fear of irritating or inconveniencing them and so spoiling the relationship. But our analysis is missing a key detail of human psychology: we like to be bothered. Not at all times and over all things, nor at the expense of our own critical needs, but fundamentally, we have a powerful urge to feel helpful. We need to be needed. All of us suffer from a fear of superfluity, which the requirements of others has a critical capacity to appease. We can pick this theme up in the realm of work. Work is at its most gratifying when it affords us a feeling that we have, over the course of the day, managed to appease the suffering or increase the pleasure of another person. There are so many stories of being exhausted by the requests of others, too few of the delight we experience when we turn around someone else's distress, boredom, or craving. We can't ultimately feel our valuable sides until we are called upon to exercise them. We don't have a sense of our strength until someone else needs us to lift something. We can't feel intelligent until someone asks us to solve an issue. We can't feel wise until we've been brought in to adjudicate a dispute. We rely on the needs of others to remind us of what we're capable. Why would the banks disrupt themselves by introducing a digital currency that would make it easier for consumers and businesses to disintermediate the banks? Well, the banks may not be the innovators. It may be that they are the reactors, that they will react when others innovate. And I'm sure that they've considered the trade-offs involved in whether to disrupt themselves by introducing digital currencies, or whether to wait and react when others introduce digital currencies. Right now, digital currency sounds very edgy and kind of alternative lifestyle. But it's becoming mainstream. And so, the largest banks in particular are very aware of this. They're investing in the technology, and they will provide this service as soon as it's profitable enough. After considering the cost to them of losing some of their current business that they're going to disrupt. Banks will eventually either be leading or following, but they'll be involved. They can't avoid it.
Does this sound like your organization? Coworkers see each other not as colleagues, but as cutthroat competitors. Bravado, extreme work hours, and unreasonable risks are rewarded. And expressing emotion, especially doubt, is a sign of weakness. If those sound familiar, your workplace could have what researchers call a masculinity contest culture. And these contests can be a sign of serious organizational dysfunction. Not only do they leave women out or force them to play in a rigged system of ridiculous rules, they also short-circuit teamwork, decrease innovation, and hurt the bottom line with employee turnover or harassment lawsuits. Researchers found 4 masculine norms that correlate strongly with organizational dysfunction. 1. Show no weakness. Swagger and overconfidence suppress vulnerability, uncertainty, and tenderness. 2. Strengthen stamina. Even in white-collar jobs, physical strength and athleticism are prized, and endurance is proven by working late into the night. 3. Put work first. Commitment to the organization comes before all else, leaving no room for family, breaks, or balance. And 4. Dog eat dog, a culture where more masculine winners defeat losers in a zero-sum game and trust is scarce. Masculinity in these workplaces is under constant threat. It must be repeatedly defended, leading to even more toxic behavior. Here, you're making an apology. There are 3 questions that you want to be able to answer. The first is, do we tell the truth? People want the company to tell the truth for 2 reasons. One is it gives them confidence that they know what went wrong. And so that means that they will presumably know what to fix. The other is that they want the company to be a truth-telling company so it can uncover the truth. The second is, on whose behalf are we acting? Is it clear that people understand that we understand that? And the third is, how do our actions benefit those people who trust us? So what is it that we're going to do in the future that's actually going to make people believe that we're going to fix the problem we created? And this is where all those facts matter, because if you've laid that out pretty clearly, then there is in fact a path to describe what it is that you're going to do. And so that action planning part is part of the apology too, because that gives you confidence that the company actually knows how to get from the current state to the future state, where this kind of thing is not going to happen. Profitability is defined by 5 competitive forces. Let's start with your buyers or customers, who would always be happier to pay less and get more. In the airline industry, price competition is fierce because so many travelers just want the cheapest flight. Then, there are your suppliers, who ideally would like to be paid more and deliver less. Powerful suppliers will use their clout to raise prices or insist on other more favorable terms. A third source of competition comes from substitute products or services that meet the same basic need you do. These aren't always obvious rivals. The toughest competitors may come from different industries. New entrants can also create tension. For instance, Southwest Airlines challenged the industry by flying just one kind of airplane, reducing costs and allowing it to offer better ticket deals. This pushed other carriers to spend more to retain their customers. Finally, you still have to fight your existing rivals, and intense competition reduces everyone's profitability. The major airlines have been in this position for years, forcing them to defend increasingly narrow profit margins with fees for exit row upgrades, checked bags, even snacks. Facebook started out as a way to talk to your friends and then became a place you shared baby photos with your grandparents. And now, you can shop on Facebook properties, you can message on Instagram, WhatsApp. Amazon is the same way. It started out as a big store. And now they make home speakers, they make original movies and television shows. So these companies all started off with one thing, and they're adding more things around it, and finance is kind of the last frontier. As more people change their banking habits, tech companies say they can bring something to the table. Google says it will build helpful tools while relying on partnerships to navigate the financial world. For its part, Apple promises to eliminate fees for its credit card and give you cash back instantly. And the Apple Pay app will have charts that help users track their buying habits. Some people are already wary of giving tech companies access to their location and their photos. Financial data is just way more personal. More concerns over privacy and power will be on display as tech firms get into finance. The data is valuable, and increasingly, they're in the hands of a few tech companies. The term core competence gets thrown around a lot, but it has a specific meaning, one that's especially important for strategists and companies with multiple business units or product lines. C.K. Prahlad and Gary Hamel, who introduced the concept, describe the diversified corporation as a large tree. The core products are the trunk and major limbs. The business units are smaller branches, and the end products are the leaves. The core competence is the root system that provides nourishment and stability. It's essentially what your organization knows about coordinating production and technology. If you only compare end products, you'll miss the real strength of your company. To figure that out, start by identifying specific core competencies. The 5 or 6 things at most that your company does better than anyone else. These meet 3 requirements. First, they provide access to a wide variety of markets. Consider what Honda knows about engines. It gives them a distinctive advantage in cars, lawn mowers, and generators. Second, core competencies contribute to the benefits of the product as perceived by the customer. Clearly, Honda's expertise in engines fits the bill here too. Finally, core competencies are hard for competitors to imitate. It's been tough for Honda's competitors to match their engine design and development skills, even with bigger R&D budgets. For noble and very understandable reasons, we've come to associate maturity and kindness with a capacity not to give up on people. But this broad and generous truth can be in danger of missing out on an important caveat, that health and maturity may also require, at points, a subtle capacity to give up on 1 or 2 people. Not always and indefinitely to keep giving them the benefit of the doubt, not invariably to forgive them one more time, not relentlessly to imagine the nice things they might really have meant beneath the thoughtless and unkind things they actually did and said. We might need occasionally to despair of someone as the price to pay for keeping faith with ourselves. We need to hear that, surprisingly, some people aren't entirely good and we aren't necessarily the problem. We need to learn to blame and get annoyed with someone other than ourselves. We need to do something very strange, walk away. This is no sign of cowardice or weakness of character. It's a sign that we have, finally, learned to love ourselves and so place our needs where these should always have been, at the center of our considerations. Without a proper understanding of childhood, it won't matter how many fortunes we have made, how stellar our reputation, or outwardly cheerful our families, we will be doomed to founder on the rocks of our own psychological complexities. We will probably be sunk by anxiety, a lack of trust, some kind of dread, paranoia, rage and self-loathing, those widespread legacies of misunderstood childhoods. Well-meaning people sometimes wonder, with considerable hope, if Sigmund Freud has not after all been proved wrong. The tricky and humiliating answer is that no. He never actually will be in the substance of his insight. Freud's eternal contribution has been to alert us to the many ways in which adult emotional lives sit on top of childhood experiences, and how we are made sick by not knowing our own histories. In a saner world, we would be left in no doubt, and even partially alerted while we were living through them, that our childhoods hold the secrets to our identities. We would know that the one subject we need to excel at above all is one not yet flagged up by the school system, the subject called my childhood. And the sign that we have graduated in the topic with honors is when at last we can know and think non-defensively about how we are, in small ways and large, a little bit mad, and what exactly in the distant past might have made us so. The idea behind recycling is simple. By breaking old products down and converting them into something usable again, we conserve natural resources. It saves forests, cuts emissions, and means less pollution. Sadly, it's not that simple. Recycling is deeply entwined with our economic system. And right now, doesn't make much economic sense. It often costs more to recycle than it does to just throw things away, which is bad news for the environment. So, is it worth paying for? Recycling saves serious amounts of energy, which in turn means lower greenhouse gas emissions. Making cans from recycled aluminium uses 95% less energy than mining and using raw materials. Recycling steel saves 60%, as does recycling paper. So, it boils down to how quickly we're able to remake the way we make things. As of 2018, we were on track to generate waste at more than double the rate of population growth through 2050, so we can expect plenty more rubbish to pile up. Some communities are running out of room to store all their trash and have stopped collecting plastic, paper, and glass. Others are just sending material to landfills or burning it. Such issues have given environmentalists cause to suggest a more radical approach is needed, saying we should rethink our relationship with material and be using less stuff in the first place. Red oceans represent existing industries and markets where industry boundaries and the rules of competition are well defined. Companies strive to outperform rivals and grab a bigger share of existing demand. As the space gets crowded, fierce competition turns the water bloody. Competitive or market competing strategy is about how to occupy red oceans. By contrast, blue ocean, or market creating strategy, is about how to create and capture unknown markets where demand is created rather than fought over. In some cases, this spawns entirely new industries. But most blue oceans emerge when a company alters the boundaries of an existing industry. The simultaneous pursuit of value and cost is the logic of blue ocean strategy. Companies that can create blue oceans usually reap the benefits for 10 to 15 years, because they are hard for rivals to copy. To realize blue ocean potential, companies should chart a strategic course past traditional industry boundaries to create new market space. General Electric developed several medical devices in emerging markets that were a little simpler and a lot less expensive. In China, they developed a compact portable ultrasound machine from scratch. It cost just $000 compared with over $000 for their high-end model. Although it didn't have all the bells and whistles, it was a hit in China's rural clinics. That's when GE realized that American doctors could use it too. Not to compete with the more expensive product, but for new uses. In situations where portability was important or space was tight. This is what Vijay Govindarajan and Chris Trimble call reverse innovation. Not only does it result in products that address market needs in emerging economies, it also creates new sales opportunities in developed ones. Reverse innovation can be tough to pull off. But there are two reasons to try. First, because emerging markets have larger populations and lower per capita GDPs, they're especially sensitive to many of the forces affecting competition in global markets today. Products built for emerging markets are more likely to be well-suited to issues that ultimately affect every market. Second, as emerging market companies grow, they'll be looking to export their own products often at much lower prices, which incumbent firms will find tough to beat. Practicing reverse innovation today will help protect incumbent firms from being disrupted by low-cost competitors tomorrow. Since its founding, America has enjoyed population growth famously fueled by high immigration rates. But Americans have historically had large families compared to other countries, as well. But times are changing. Birth rates today have fallen to their lowest point in history. And while birth rates have historically been connected to economic cycles, the present decline is happening during good economic times. The causes of the decline will be familiar for many viewers: high housing costs, less dating and marriage, economic and social uncertainties. And even though surveys show Americans still want big families, there are no cheap, easy solutions to fix this problem. And unfortunately, the problem is self-reinforcing. Fewer children means that future generations will have fewer workers serving more people, who themselves will have less time to bear and care for children or retirees, for that matter. Even if Americans reform housing policy or offer greater financial support for families, our birth rates will continue to decline. And the fast economic growth that made America so strong in the 20th century could vanish in the 21st. More than 20 years ago, Ron Haskins and Isabel Sawhill at the Brookings Institution sifted the social science data and found that anyone who finishes high school, works full-time, and marries before having children almost never experiences poverty. They called this the success sequence. What this sequence misses is that each of these steps is enormously complex. It takes a lot of parental attention, energy, and love before a child crosses the stage at a high school graduation. Social networks are critical to finding a full-time job. Having marriage is just arguably the most complex challenge of all. Looked at this way, it's not so much a sequence as a decades-long dialogue between the individual, their family and friends, and the community. Education, work, and marriage are the marks of a successful life as it unfolds. We owe Haskins and Sawhill a profound thanks for bringing us the success sequence. The job now is developing the strategies for strengthening families and communities so that more people find the path and stay on it. Successful economies and cultures are built on trust. But a number of high-profile data breaches and privacy intrusions have caused anxiety for consumers and gotten the attention of Washington. New legislation may be needed to bolster confidence in the digital marketplace. But we've got to be thoughtful about it, so we don't strangle the golden goose that we call the Internet. 3 points. Explosive growth of digital services shows that the benefits of data flows far outweigh the costs. Slow productivity growth in many industries stems from a lack of information intensity, too little data. Policies should thus encourage the use of more data while putting consumers in control of sensitive information. A new national privacy law would consolidate existing industry-specific laws, prevent a patchwork of conflicting state laws, and clarify the FTC's enforcement strategy for the digital age. But regulations cannot solve every problem. Evolving social norms, more robust institutions, and new privacy-promoting technologies will actually do most of the heavy lifting of protecting our privacy and promoting data flows. The main problem we have isn't an issue of actually doing the work. It's just starting. Starting is the hardest part. So how do we make it easier? Take your large task and break it into something small. Once you think you've made it small, make it even smaller than that. Do the same with your time commitment. It's great that you blocked out the next 3 hours to do work, but guess what? Studying for 3 hours is incredibly daunting. You do not want to do that. You want to watch Med School Insider's YouTube videos instead. Here's how you get past that: you're not studying for 3 hours anymore. Instead, you're studying for only 25 minutes, which is a lot easier than 3 hours. After those 25 minutes are done, you're getting a break, guaranteed. Seems simple enough. This is the Pomodoro technique in action. And it is one of my favorite study hacks. Early on in the day, I generally like to knock out the difficult tasks first since it makes the rest of the day a breeze. But I don't always get the luxury of doing that. There are instances where starting is so difficult that there's no way I would be able to tackle the most daunting task first. In those instances, I start with something easy. That can be something as simple as doing my laundry or washing dishes. Once I've built the momentum of getting something small done, having a small victory, it becomes much easier to step it up to something a little bigger. Human beings in the West Savannah need each other in order to survive. In today's modern society, people need protection from other people too. Rousseau was the first to acknowledge that. So if we agree that this is one of the first fundamental functions of society, we should in fact reject any human behavior that goes against this theory. So it's true Beethoven was a rude and vulgar person who probably suffered from bipolar disorder. Van Gogh lost his mind. Other artists can be labeled as eccentric, antisocial, or even estranged from society. Nevertheless, as long as they don't cross over the line and breach the basic human contract, we may savor and rejoice the art and creations. This is why I am able to enjoy Beethoven's magnificent creations. Yet on the other hand, as a daughter of a Holocaust survivor, I am unable to listen to the music, magnificent as it may be, of composers who believe, for example, in the final solutions of the Jews. An artist that breaches this contract, that endangers the freedom and safety of members of society, regardless of their religion, faith, beliefs, or background. By a direct action, and this is very important, only by a direct action, should lose his place in society, together with a privileged platform of which he presents his creativity and art. And along with this, the power we attribute to it. Unless he regrets his action. Yes. An apology can be accepted. When the Second World War came to an end, the British took some German civilians around the Belsen concentration camp. But why did they do this? To show them what their own soldiers had done during the war. It was reported that one of the civilians had said, "What terrible criminals these prisoners must have been to receive such treatment." Not uttered by a guard, but by a civilian. The just world hypothesis is a cognitive bias in which we, as human beings, try to make sense of a world that is unfortunately unjust. We like to believe noble acts lead to reward, and bad actions result in punishment. So when we see bad things happen to good people, and good to bad, there is a tendency to view such situations in a way that reduces this sense of guilt or discomfort. So, why do humans feel awkwardness? According to Tai Toshiro, author of the appropriately titled book Awkward, this is part of human evolution. In hunter-gatherer times, sticking with social norms, like saying thank you when someone gives you something, or waiting your turn for food, was a way to keep tight-knit groups together and keep out anyone who might be a threat. Today, we're still sensitive to tiny, even silly social customs like responding to "how are you" with fine as a sign of mutual respect. When you deviate from those norms, it's awkward. And for some people, these social graces just don't come naturally. Take eye contact, for example. Studies say the right amount of eye contact during conversations is about 3.3 seconds. But awkward people don't instinctively do that. But when we don't look people in the eyes, it makes them feel socially ostracized. According to Toshiro's work, awkward people tend to look at other parts of the face, like the chin or the ear, more than the eyes. Therefore, they might end up alienating the person they're talking to. And missing out on important information about how that person might be feeling. The good news is that if your brain isn't great at social cues, it might be good at other stuff instead. Research shows that many autistic people are amazing at memory, pattern recognition, and problem solving. Let's imagine you're about to hold a meeting to make an important decision. And you are in a hurry. Is it better to hold the meeting standing up or sitting down? Researchers from the University of Missouri asked groups of people to imagine that they'd crashed on the moon. And then only a few pieces of equipment had survived the crash. The groups were asked to identify which bits of equipment were most important, and their decisions were compared to the correct answers supplied by NASA. Some of groups held their meeting standing up, and the others held them sitting down. Sit-down meeting lasted 34% longer, but two types of meeting produced the same number of correct decisions. And so next time you need to hold a meeting in order to make an important decision, you can save time by simply standing up. When economists study gift-giving, they're very concerned with one thing: waste. Let's say, hypothetically, that my grandmother buys me a sweater that I hate, and your grandmother buys you a sweater that you hate. Sorry, grandmothers. Before long, we're talking about billions of dollars in waste in the economy. Economists call it deadweight loss, and they estimate that up to 30% of the value of all gifts is wasted. That means the company's wasted time making the gift. It means the giver's wasted time giving it out. And it means the recipient's wasted time returning it. There's a way to fix this. There is a very specific gift that is always worth the exact same to both the giver and the receiver. It's called cash. The good thing about cash is that the receiver can always make use of 100% of its value. The bad thing about cold, hard cash is that it's cold. It doesn't say anything except, "Here, take some money." So this is a conundrum. We know that the more comfortable we feel around someone, the less effort we will make about how we appear. Conversely, the more anxious we are about the judgment of others, the more our reflection has the power to horrify us. The issue is never that of our appearance. It is about our sense of vulnerability to humiliation. When we meet people who are perpetually sick with worry that they are not attractive enough, we should not rush in with physical compliments. This is only to foster and unwittingly reward an aggravating criterion of judgment. We should learn to spot the wound in their early relationships that have made it so hard for them to trust that they could matter to others in their basic state. And that, therefore, perpetually evokes in them an unflattering self-image. They are not ugly per se. They were, when it mattered, left painfully unloved and ignored to an extent that they are liable never to have recognized or mourned adequately. Their arrival in the world did not delight a few people as it should have done, and therefore, they need compassion, sympathy, and emotional validation far more than they will ever require the tools of outward beautification. Feeling ugly stems from a deficit of love, never of beauty. I encourage people to provide feedback to one another. It's a gift. It's also often part of your job. But too often, we don't go far enough. So I suggest that we create psychological contracts. You don't do it with everybody. But it's an opportunity to agree to exchange extremely honest feedback by mutual consent in a safe and trusting way. I say to somebody who I trust, whose opinion matters to me, "I'm getting up on stage. Let me know afterwards, was I clear? Did I give too much information? Too little information? Did I move too much? Did I engage with the audience? Tell me the truth. That's an immediate request for honest feedback, and we are creating a psychological contract. You're not going out of bounds if you tell me exactly what you think. I also tell people if they're going into a meeting, pick the person who's going to pull on their ear to let you know you're going off topic, whether your data is really not holding up in that room, and getting an immediate sense from somebody, the unvarnished truth about what's going on. Now, what's really interesting about this time is that because of coronavirus, kids have all this time to self-reflect and self-assess. And so we should be actively promoting meta-learning during this time. And so what I've suggested is that we promote the idea of a learning journal. So the idea is this: let kids decide their own learning path. Let them decide what they want to learn. It could be if they want to learn how to cook. It could be they want to learn how to drive a car. It doesn't matter. What's important is that they write down their learning journey. And so there are 3 components to a learning journal. First is to define the goal concretely and precisely. It's better to say, I want to be able to run a marathon in less than 4 hours than it is to say, I want to finish first in a marathon. Second is to write down the learning process. So think of a cooking recipe and writing down how you cook something. The third and most important component of a learning journal is to write down your observations, collect data, self-reflect, and develop new learning strategies for yourself. And during this process, teachers don't go away. Teachers play a very important role in that they become coaches. I would say that being a coach has 3 main functions. The first function is to motivate the student. The second function is to identify weaknesses in the learning journal. And the third and most important function is to constantly suggest new learning strategies. So, the 3 things that I think it really takes to be an effective manager are these. First of all, learn to delegate, The most important thing is you have to trust your people to do work themselves, and if you're in the business of overseeing every single decision they make, you're not going to be a very effective manager because you'll be stretched too thin, and you'll certainly never be able to rise to higher levels of management where you're overseeing dozens or hundreds or even thousands of people. So that's the first thing. The second is work hard to understand what the people underneath you do. They have this tendency to think you know. If I came up through one skill as I oversee people with different skills, I'm just going to trust them to get it right, and you have to. Of course, you're not going to be able to understand what everybody on your team does all day, but if you can understand their motivations, their terminology, their way of communicating, you're going to be a lot better as a manager. And finally, this is a kind of simple thing. But have as many one-on-one meetings as you possibly can. I think one thing that there's a lot of evidence is that having one-on-one meetings, especially with your direct reports, is one of the strongest predictors of success as a manager. Big meetings aren't good. Little meetings can be very good. It's time-consuming. It's hard, but it's a thing that really correlates with success as a manager. One of the things I do in my psychology seminar is I assign papers to students, and then I extract out propositions from the papers. And they're propositions that are debatable. Well, what you want to do as an educator is you don't want to put forward a specific point of view. Not when what you're trying to do is to discuss a contentious issue. What you want to do is teach people how to take an argument apart and formulate a response. And to do that, it's actually extraordinarily useful to arbitrarily assign positions to people. It's like, I don't care what you think, your pro on this topic, generate an argument. And what that does is it vastly widens people's conceptualizations of the argumentative space. Because most really contentious issues, gun control, abortion, those sorts of things, there is a lot to be said on both sides. They wouldn't be contentious issues otherwise. They're issues that don't go away. Well, why? Well, because they're so complex. They don't lend themselves to easy unitary solutions. One of the things you want to learn if you're educated is that on any complex subject, there's a lot to be said. And that you're going to come at that with your particular ideological bias, let's say, your temperamental bias. Maybe even you might even come at it with things you've actually thought about, although that's pretty damn rare. But you need to learn just exactly how localized your viewpoint is. A very famous study done by colleagues at Duke University flashed either the Apple logo or the IBM logo to two randomized groups of participants. The study found that after being subliminally exposed to the Apple logo, compared to when you'd been exposed to the IBM logo, participants performed better on creative tasks. And the argument is that Apple has been telling you this story over and over again, that Apple is the brand for hip, cool, fun, creative people. This is the true power of brands. They can influence our behavior in ways that extend way beyond the point of sale. So to what degree can the influence of brands wreak havoc on our ability to make rational spending decisions? This is Americus Reed. He studies identity and marketing at the University of Pennsylvania. When I make choices about different brands, I'm choosing to create an identity. When I put that shirt on, when I put those shoes on, those jeans, that hat, someone is going to form an impression about what I'm about. So if I'm choosing Nike over Under Armour, I'm choosing a kind of different way to express affiliation with sport. The Nike thing is about performance. The Under Armour thing is about the underdog. I have to choose which of these different conceptual pathways is most consistent with where I am in my life. And once a consumer makes that choice, their relationship with a brand can deepen to the point where they identify with that brand like family. And once you identify with a brand, it can shape the way you behave. A very famous study done by colleagues at Duke University flashed either the Apple logo or the IBM logo to two randomized groups of participants. The study found that after being subliminally exposed to the Apple logo, compared to when you'd been exposed to the IBM logo, participants performed better on creative tasks. And the argument is that Apple has been telling you this story over and over again, that Apple is the brand for hip, cool, fun, creative people. This is the true power of brands. They can influence our behavior in ways that extend way beyond the point of sale. So to what degree can the influence of brands wreak havoc on our ability to make rational spending decisions? This is Americus Reed. He studies identity and marketing at the University of Pennsylvania. When I make choices about different brands, I'm choosing to create an identity. When I put that shirt on, when I put those shoes on, those jeans, that hat, someone is going to form an impression about what I'm about. So if I'm choosing Nike over Under Armour, I'm choosing a kind of different way to express affiliation with sport. The Nike thing is about performance. The Under Armour thing is about the underdog. I have to choose which of these different conceptual pathways is most consistent with where I am in my life. And once a consumer makes that choice, their relationship with a brand can deepen to the point where they identify with that brand like family. And once you identify with a brand, it can shape the way you behave. In fact, a lot of what we perceive as flavor comes from odor molecules that float up to our smell receptors through our mouths. And as with taste, studies have shown that the visual cues we get from color help us identify smells more quickly and accurately. In fact, one 1981 study found that the source of a smell doesn't have to be the corresponding color. The color and odor just sort of need to be in the same place. Like, the author of this study found that if an odor was presented along with colored words or patches, subjects could identify it faster and more accurately than odors presented without appropriate color cues. So as an example, the smell of lemon would likely be easier to identify in a yellow room than in a pink room. Which sounds strange. But what all this research adds up to is very clear evidence that color influences our perception of smell and taste. What's less clear is why this happens. Scientists have not nailed down one single answer, but there are a few possibilities. The first is that the appearance of food or drinks produces what some researchers call an expectancy-based effect. Basically, the color of something tells you what to expect, and your expectation is actually enough to overpower reality and influence the way you identify a taste or smell. This idea is similar to the placebo effect, where people's beliefs about a treatment actually change the symptoms they experience. Another way color could influence how we identify a flavor or smell is by directing our attention. So, some scientists wondered how much these chemosignals might play a role in emotional contagion among humans. In a 2012 study, one team of researchers designed an experiment to find out. In it, one set of participants watched videos that would provoke either fear or disgust while wearing sweat pads in their armpits. Afterwards, a second set of participants were asked to smell those sweat pads, and the experimenters recorded their emotional state. Conveniently, the emotions of fear and disgust tend to provoke opposite physical responses. When you're scared, your body will typically try to take in more sensory information. So your face will open up as you breathe more deeply and scan the environment with your eyes. On the other hand, when you're disgusted, you'll generally reject sensory information. Like, you'll walk past a row of porta potties and you'll scrunch up your face, take really shallow breaths, and look around less. Now, these reactions aren't always super visible to the eye. But by monitoring their eyes and facial movements, the researchers could tell which facial muscles were activated in each person, and which emotional state their expressions reflected. And the authors found that participants who sniffed disgust sweat tended to display disgust, which, seems like a normal reaction when you're sniffing sweat pads, but also, those who sniffed fear sweat would also display fear.